Welcome to Weaving Paths.
Bienvenido a Tejiendo Caminos.
Bem-vindos a Tecendo Caminhos,
a podcast brought to you by the EU-LAS Jean Monnet Network, which looks at the bi-regional relations between Latin America, the Caribbean, and the European Union. Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm joined by two great minds behind one of the most ambitious and timely pieces of research in EU-Latin America relations right now, the AMLAT Radar 2026. This is a public opinion survey on how Latin Americans perceive the world, geopolitics, global powers, sovereignty, trust, emotions, and it's a collective effort produced by the Diálogo y Paz group, Guadalupe González, Mónica Hirst, Carlos Luján, Carlos A. Romero, and Juan Tokatlian, with support from Luis Martín Sosa. The collaborative spirit matters, and you'll hear it in this conversation. What makes this edition particularly special is that it builds directly on the 2021 survey. So for the very first time, we're not just looking at a snapshot, but we're tracking the change. And in just 4 years, this world has shifted dramatically. New powers are rising, old alliances are fraying, and public opinion in Latin America is telling a very different story to the ones governments might assume. I'm speaking with two members of the AMLAT survey team today, Juan Tokatlian and Mónica Hirst, and we get into all of it. Venezuela, Gaza, Europe's fading credibility, China's growing appeal, and what any of this really means for civil society. As always, you can find links to everything we're talking about in the description of this podcast, along with relevant materials. And if you like this episode, please like and subscribe, and of course let us know in the comments wherever you are listening. Now, let's get into it. Welcome to the EU-LAS Weaving Paths podcast. It's fantastic to have you both here, and thank you so much for your time today.
Okay. Thank you for having us here today.
Absolutely. Thank you both. So diving right in then, your survey was conducted in late 2025, and that is notably before the January 3rd military action in Venezuela, January 3rd, 2026. So I wanted to start by asking whether or how you felt this event kind of shifted the geopolitical landscape that you captured in your research.
Well, maybe we could start out. This is not the first time that we have this situation in which important and, of course, dramatic facts take place right afterwards our survey has been conducted. I mean, it happened also in the 2022 experience, which took place in 2021. And it was kind of the dawn of the war in Ukraine. And it was in the middle of the context of the withdrawal from Afghanistan. So the fact that we have these dramatic environments, international environments, are taking place while we are conducting and while we are thinking of the questions we want to fit in, it's not the first time. Definitely, there's no doubt that this scenario now has become much more dramatic than the previous. So this would be one first aspect that I would like to underline. The second one is that, as in any survey, there is a gap in between when the questions are formulated, are implemented in the survey, the survey takes place, and when we analyze them. So here again, we have the ongoing of a dramatic scenario, this time involving our region in a much more direct form. Latin America has become part and an important part and a dramatic part of the changing tides and developments in the world politics, and the fact that we were experimenting this while we were doing it and while we were analyzing the data also made things quite different from the first experience. Okay, so talking about the concrete scenario of 25 and 26, because we were exactly at that point well, we had, as our team is a team which is built up with analysts of international relations. We are all IR experts. So we had been following for our work and for our related to our own concerns, what was going on. What we did not know, and that's where I think the survey has a contribution, is how our societies in Latin America were feeling and perceiving what was going on. And I think that this is one of the innovations and one of the contributions of our survey. It's the fact that we can bring in not only what we knew very well, how our governments were reacting and were being part or not of a special relationship with the United States, were voting in specific ways at the UN, et cetera, et cetera. That we had, but we didn't know how our societies were perceiving and feeling, because this is something also that I would like to underline. Our survey introduced that emotional dimension regarding perceptions on international facts and developments. And that was something new also. So we were not only looking at and focusing on perceptions, but also on emotions. So having said that, we definitely perceive and realize that from the data that there had been already an important impact of the international and the political developments in the societies of Latin America. But not only because of what happened against and everything that went on against Venezuela, which is one of the countries in the survey, but also because of an enormous, and this was a very positive finding of the survey, the enormous concern of the region and of the region's societies regarding international developments tout court, no? In all senses. It was not only the regional agenda that was being felt and being perceived. It was the whole scenario, the whole international scenario. And what we found was an enormous amount of information in the perceptions, and of course, the specificities in the feelings, in the emotions of the region. Just to wrap up, regarding the attack against Venezuela, first of all, the importance of uncertainty that comes out in our survey as the main feeling, the main emotion in the region is not only related to, let's put it like this, to the Donroe doctrine, but also to the whole uncertainty regarding the international scenario and the general facts and developments in the international world. Now, regarding Venezuela, and I would just like to bring up this data, it's uncertainty, but it's also hope. Venezuela, of the 10 countries we have been working with in this survey, is the only country that expresses an important amount of hope regarding the situation in the world at this point. And this is very interesting because Venezuela at this point, I mean, it had not had its president kidnapped and taken to the United States, but it was under military attacks already, very close to their borders and shores, and of course with a lot of, and the possibility of an invasion was already more than a hypothesis. And even so, the sentiment, the emotion of hope was very powerful. So, and this says a lot. We will see coherence in other aspects and other questions of the survey regarding Venezuela. But I think that this is important because it shows the desperation in which Venezuela was already at that point also.
Mhm, mhm. Well, let me just add two things, very brief. Monica summarized the findings and the scenario and the development extraordinarily well. On two different sides. The first one is that our survey showed that the main concern of Latin Americans was war and armed conflicts. And together with that, a sense of growing uneasiness with what's going on in terms of international law. In that sense, even though the Venezuelan attack was after our survey, it shows two things about public opinion and governments, and public opinion and Europe and Latin America. Very briefly, in essence, the main priority, the second main priority of the 10 countries that we evaluated in this survey showed that the defense of national sovereignty was crucial. And what the Venezuela example showed us afterwards is that our countries are so much divided that they didn't put forward a coherent, consistent, broad, unified position vis-a-vis what has happened. This is important. We have a society that cares much more about sovereignty, maybe, than many governments in the area today. And the second consideration was the absolute, total, dramatic, significant silence of Europe while there were extrajudicial executions in the Caribbean and in the Pacific. And so the attack on Venezuela suddenly creates a main concern among the Europeans on Greenland. Well, Greenland could face something very similar. So, surprisingly enough, Venezuela also becomes an issue for the Europeans, not because of the defense of international law, but suddenly realizing that Trump may be moving ahead and do something. The use of force, the threat, and finally the decision to go forward with taking to the United States Greenland. So the Venezuelan case, it's significant in that both relation to our governments and the governments of Europe.
Thank you. Thank you for such a comprehensive answer, both. It sounds like an incredible challenge to design and interpret this survey with such fast changing, kind of volatile context. As you mentioned there, Monica, particularly because this edition of your survey captures an emotional dimension for the first time, which is super interesting. And Juan, a very interesting last point that you ended on as well, like what we can read from the survey is of course one thing, but then to zoom out and see how it compares to the action or inaction of governments in Latin America and indeed Europe after January 3rd in itself is just fascinating. It really reveals such tension, I guess, between the public view of sovereignty and then, of course, how a government prioritizes that as well. Staying on Europe for a moment, in the survey, it describes Europe's presence as having, quote, diffuse closeness and declining presence for Latin Americans, which obviously is quite negative and is a sad thing to hear, especially coming from the EU-LAS network. So for anyone wanting to build bridges between the regions, say in our network or beyond, what is the most alarming data point that you found? And let's explore maybe for a moment the causes of it.
I think that it's not a single issue or a single point. I
Exactly.
would argue that there are at least three main questions that you have to take into consideration about our assertion. First, the fact that obviously still Europe is a kind of point of reference in terms of as a normative power. Issues like human rights, issues like peace, issues like humanitarian law are perceived by Latin Americans as issues where the role and the profile of Europe is significant, relevant, outstanding. But if you compare the first poll done in 2021 and this one, while in 2021, more or less 50% of the answers showed this enormous normative power of the United States, at this time, even though it's still significant, it's only 1/3. So people are thinking, well, what is going on with this normative power? If on Ukraine it says this and asks this and acts like this, and on Gaza acts like this and changes its position. So there is a concern that this normative power of Europe is real, but it's diminishing due to maybe European underlying decisions related both to the global situation, the US, Europe relations, etc. The second consideration, in our first survey, in terms of development models, there were 3 countries that were key in terms of development model: Germany, Canada, and the United States. They were the 3 top countries. In this one, the first 2 top countries was first China and then Japan. What happened with the Western model, and in particular the European model? I think that people are believing, understanding that power is moving from the West to the East, that Asians somehow are now or have developed a certain capacity to provide something that is crucial, and that is the fight against poverty. When they learn that China has made possible the fact that more than 600 million Chinese left poverty and somehow becomes part of the middle class, they are surprised. They are really fascinated with this idea, because one of the main concerns of Latin Americans is absolute poverty. So the country somehow that answers that today, it's not France or Italy or Germany, it's China. And my third argument will be that many years ago, the integration model of Europe, how the Europeans were able to create the European Union, create a strong economic relation, was something perceived in Latin America as an excellent experience to somehow practice in the area. But then people are looking at Brexit, and then they are understanding that the so-called welfare state in Europe is diminishing or is restructuring. And my sense is that that integration model is not something that today Latin Americans will embrace, in part because of our own bad experience with integration, and in part because Europe is not there, the light at the end of the tunnel anymore. So again, I would say that more than one issue. If you put all these three issues all together, you will see why the perception is still good of Europe, but it's not as good as it used to be.
Yeah. I would like to add here two aspects to what Juan just put laid on the table, which is completely um, covering the question, but I think there you can underline two aspects. The first one has to do with one of the points that that Juan just mentioned, and which from an analytical, broader perspective, we interpret also as a tendency to, I mean, the tendency regarding Europe is not only regarding Europe, that's what comes up, it's regarding the United States also. So at the end of the day, what we perceive is that it is a tendency regarding the Western world. So there is a question of a lower confidence of I mean, the positive agenda in general towards the Western world has dramatically shifted from 4 years ago to now. And so if we compare, and that's something we do all the time in this survey, Europe with the United States and China, what comes out now is that this tendency of a parting, of really having a much more how could I say this, less confidence, less trust regarding Western powers, regarding what they have to offer us. And that's the point. What do we have to, what are our expectations? No, and that's what really has changed, is that our expectations vis-a-vis Western powers, and of course, this survey does have a special look on Europe, but it does also try to compare with the United States and with China. Now, having said that, a second issue I would like to underline is that going back to sentiments, to emotions, when we compare the emotions vis-a-vis these three blocks of power, and this opening a parenthesis, one thing that is interesting is that definitely from a Latin American perspective, this is a multipolar or a multiplexity world. We cannot think of power, of international power, as a monolithic process or a monolithic actor. There are not. It depends. It always depends on what you're talking about. No, and there you will find different answers. But that's, and let me close the parenthesis. And so going back to the emotions, it's very interesting because the hope expressed towards Europe is much more important than the hope expressed towards the United States and towards China. Okay, so you would be happy about it. Said, okay, good. So that means we still have a positive agenda to work on. We do, but also the admiration you have towards Europe is half of the admiration you have towards China. So you can admire a block of power, you can admire a power pole, but that doesn't mean you have hope towards it. And you can have hope towards it, and that doesn't mean you will admire. You will acknowledge what they, how they play the cards in the world politics, and where they stand regarding specific issues.
Right. What a worrying result overall, though, like to see such a dramatic change in how Europe is perceived by public opinion, or in public opinion, just in the last 4 years. Building on your last point there, Monica, on distinction between feelings of hope, feelings of admiration, and how people relate to different powers, the survey does still rank deepening ties with Europe higher in their foreign policy priorities than ties, say, with China or the US. With everything you've mentioned regarding significance and admiration and trust and such, how can Europe read that signal, and what would it actually look like in practice for both regions?
But
Yes,
okay,
go ahead.
I think that the first point, which is almost obvious in this survey, and it repeats itself, and it's good that it repeats itself in different ways, so there's no doubt about it, is I would say, almost the aversion, the complete rejection there is this moment towards what we call the Trump factor. So here, I mean, and this has definitely affected perceptions and emotions towards the United States in general. And when we specify in our questions and get the answers back, focusing on Trump, it is very clear, but on the United States as well. I mean, definitely the Trump factor has contaminated trust, expectations, and willings and the political will to engage and to expand ties with the United States. And so things may not be as fluid as they were China, but the biggest contrast here, I would say, is between Europe and the United States, in the sense that there is a clearer territory to be built up regarding the ties with Europe than with the United States. Now, having said that, there is also a very pragmatic approach from the societies when they address the question of foreign policy priorities. So, it is interesting, and from my perspective, sadly interesting, to verify that there is much less interest and motivation towards regional ties and regional integration or regionalism in general on the part of our surveyed. But it is a very, first of all, it's a very pragmatic approach in which trade is a major issue. I mean, it's tangible, it's economic, and it's, of course, an area in which you want fast results. That's what trade is about. Now, on the other side, there's a lot, and that was an interesting and positive finding, was the concern and the place in which sovereignty comes. And sovereignty is as important as trade, and we're not talking about territorial sovereignty. We're not talking about sovereignty built upon military strength, and that was also very interesting to acknowledge, because it shows, first of all, a more sophisticated perception on the question of sovereignty. Sovereignty has different manifestations, different areas in which it has to be protected. And the idea that this is part of the role and the part of the agenda and part of the agency of our countries, because it's a foreign policy demand expectation, sounded to us something that is very telling of the region. The region wants to be part, feels itself as part, is positive about itself. I mean, the findings regarding the perceptions on what are the expectations for the next 5 years are positive regarding the region, but also they stand for themselves. They have a very clear perception of what belongs to to the region. Let's put it like that. What belongs to us? What is ours? And why and where is sovereignty a relevant card and flag, let's say, to be waved?
Let me go back to a point Monica made before. In relation to Europe, the sentiment that is more prevalent is hope. And that is good. That is excellent. Monica explained that. In terms of the United States, what is the answer, the majority of the answer is distrust. And in terms of China, as Monica said also, it's admiration. So this, I would say, gives Europe an opportunity, because hope means, at the end of the day, the expectation of something positive. Distrust is terrible, and admiration may become someday hope, but it's still admiration. It's just that. So if you put these three actors together, I think that there is something good for Europe and an opportunity. Now, it is not clear what that opportunity means. And my sense is that that hope relates to a sentiment that is not nostalgic in Latin America, but is crucial, that of uncertainty. Latin Americans realize that what was part of the past is not coming back. Okay? So they are uncertain about the future. Under that uncertainty, they still hold the idea that Europe can do something, can play a role, can be a card, can be a counterpart, can be a bridge. So what this means, is my understanding, obviously, is that either this opportunity is filled up or is lost. And that part belongs to Europe. Because from this side of the Atlantic, people are willing, as the song said, give peace a chance, give Europe a chance. I mean, let's go back. Okay. There are ties, historical ties, migration, culture, investment. Okay, let's try again. But I insist that the responsibility for catching up with this opportunity is European.
Yeah, just to mend the last point regarding what Juan just said, it's very interesting. I'm looking here at the data because, in fact, the doesn't respond regarding Europe is regarding the feelings, the emotions regarding the three no opposed are the larger. Because, and that, I mean, if you add a hope with you don't know, don't respond, you have 50%. That means the empty slot, as Juan was mentioning, is there. And the don't know, it doesn't respond regarding the United States is very low, because it is very clear that mistrust is the strongest feeling. So, so there you have, I mean, the evidence. I mean, it's really very clear what Europe could work on regarding it's an opportunity, either a conscious one, a known one. We know what we want, or we don't know, but it's there, But it doesn't. It is not replaced for any negative sentiment, negative emotion. And so I think that some psychoanalysis done to this graphic can be useful.
Yeah, an opportunity I really hope Europe would seize. And a great last point on the data, Monica, the ambiguity is absolutely an opportunity there to change the tide. As you mentioned earlier, Juan, Europe's strongest card as a region has been its normative leadership. That's human rights, peace, rule of law, etc. And even though, as we've explored so far, we can see now a loss in its credibility due to its action, or should we just call it what it is? It's inaction on major international issues like Gaza. I really want to understand how damaging that impact has been on civil society, like moving away from just our expectations on our governments and looking at what people and broader society can do to promote stronger relations and civil society diplomacy. What do you think?
Well, let me again go back to some of the considerations introduced by Monica. Our sense is that what this survey reveals, it's a very largely well-informed Latin American population. This is important. This shows that people are really capturing what is going on. They learn about that through different means. Also, that people's opinions are quite nuanced. I mean, they are not categorical. They are not binary. Third, I think that there is a sense of pragmatism. And in that sense, if you combine these three facts, the damage, if we can call that, vis-a-vis the perception of Europe, is that people dislike inconsistency. I mean, the poll reveals that Latin America supports what Europe is working and doing in favor of Ukraine because of the invasion, because of Russia. Putin is at the top of the leaders that are disliked by Latin Americans, together with Trump, that is ahead of Putin. So there is a consistency from that point of view on the part of Latin Americans. But suddenly Gaza appears, and Gaza creates a sentiment that is dramatic in a sense, because if you see the results, most people in Latin America, even in countries where the official position is more pro-Israel, the people are believing that there is a genocide going on there. And when you realize that and you see the position of Europe, then there is a matter of concern, because inconsistency brings concern. I will argue that this perception in Latin America and this together opportunity with inconsistencies, let's call it, is because it is clear the official governmental diplomacy of the European countries vis-a-vis Latin America. And people realize that. It's obvious that there is a business diplomacy. I mean, people investing in Latin America, even less than 20 years ago, but Europeans are doing some investment in certain countries more than others. What is missing is a sort of citizens diplomacy between Europeans and Latin Americans. And I think that to fill that relative vacuum between hope and inconsistence, the role of the people, the citizens, is crucial. And so my sense is that we need young people more involved in the relations between our two regions, scientists, NGOs, feminist movements, environmental movements, labor. So at the end of the day, this survey tacitly gives a space for the citizens of Latin America and Europe. And when I said before, this is an opportunity. This is also an opportunity, a societal opportunity. And even under difficult situations in both areas, I think that it's time to rethink about that. Is there room for that? Is there interest for that? Is there chances for that? Are there resources for that? These are challenges. And so, again, hope and consistency gives a room, generates a room for a sort of citizen diplomacy to establish a new bridge between Latin America.
Yeah, let me just add, I mean, probably to wrap up, Juan's wrapping up points. One thing that occurred to me the other day, and I think it's interesting to bring it up here at this interview, Emily, is that Europe is quite heterogeneous as well. No, I would say Europe might be more heterogeneous at this moment regarding the perceptions of its society, at least regarding Latin America, for sure. So the other day I was in an interview in an Austrian context, and the Austrian specialist who was interviewing me was very puzzled regarding what I had mentioned someplace else and what came out in the survey regarding Spain and regarding the connection in the bridge. There is this moment, probably I'm going referring to what Juan just mentioned, the three different kinds of bridges there can exist between Latin America and Europe, and how the societal bridge between Spain, and you are in Catalonia, between Spain and Latin America is much more vivid, has much more ways of expression than with other spots of Europe in this moment. You just had this enormous progressive summit, taking place in Barcelona, right? And Latin America was an important actor there, and our presidents came along, and many NGOs and many social movement representatives were there, and Spain is we feel it sometimes as an oasis regarding political perceptions, regarding the possibilities of speaking political language with more synergies, and basically it doesn't have to do with the language. Let's make it clear. It has to do with expectations and regarding how societies connect. Of course, the Latin American diasporas in Spain must play an important role. There's no doubt about that. But it's not only that. So anyway, what I want to underline here is that probably and maybe the Mercosur agreements now with European Union can be helpful in that sense. Maybe there is still a Latin American agenda and Latin American project or process of closer interaction that could take place if expectations and civilizatory ticks, not to say nostalgic possibilities, are kept in the closet. I mean, I think that Latin America is not looking, the expectation Latin Americans have towards Europe are not that they have lessons they must learn. They have models they must copy. They have worldviews they must reproduce. It is much more a possibility of working together on the basis that each one is who it is, and it is where it is, and there is a whole new horizon of uncertainties regarding world political and economic developments that could be thought of together, or at least in a more collaborative way.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Vera. An excellent segue, as this is exactly what the EU-LAS aims to do. And any listeners who might be interested to understand more about how we collaborate between educational institutions in Latin America and the Caribbean and Europe, I highly recommend you head to our website and find out more. It really does feel like there is a significant opportunity for bridges to be built, to be repaired, to, let's say, concreted into place between our regions, and some fantastic examples that you gave there. Anyway, to end, what is one thing, a policy, a format, a commitment that institutions or networks like EU-LAS could do in the next 12 months that would genuinely move the needle and really encourage civil and governmental engagement with one another?
You want to start, Monica?
Read
You
our
want
survey.
Definitely.
Well, let me say two things, just to finish. The critical question, the critical tacit question is, at the end of the day, even though there are these expectations on Latin American public opinion, even though there is a positive in general view of Europe, etc., it's Europe moving towards a gradual decoupling from Latin America? Or is Europe willing to consider, not just for geopolitical considerations, the weight, the role, the relevance of Latin America? I think that's the key underlying consideration. Monica may add probably some additional elements. And then, in that sense, let me remind you of two things. One that is in the survey, and the other one that is not in the survey. The one in the survey, it is consistent, significant, massive commitment by the whole Latin American public opinion reviewed in this poll in favor of non-proliferation. This is critical today. This is overwhelmingly critical today. And in that sense, there is a Latin America that is not naive on peace. It's consistent in the idea that we need peace, and in the words of President Lula, tranquility, if we want to have development and stability altogether in the area. In that sense, the NGOs in Europe, like yourself, are willing to go forward against what we perceive in Latin America as a European rearmament? Is peace at the center stage of your consideration? Because if not, well, I'm sorry, but the next survey will show that the distance has enlarged between Latin America and Europe. And the second, that is not part of the survey. Let me remind that when the UN was created, 1945, 81 years ago, there were only 51 countries, 20 of them from Latin America, 9, and only 9 of them from Western Europe. So the largest majority in the creation, at the creation of the UN, was Latin America. And the UN was not the architecture of a sole power like the United States, or part of an agreement with the Soviet Union and the United States. Latin America provided a lot in terms of ideas, principles, norms, rules, together with whom? The Western European countries. On what issues? International law. So the question is then, is there room, is there interest in working together again to avoid the collapse of international law? Is Europe and Latin America committed? Or can we, from the societies, push our governments there and here about trying to at least avoid the absolute collapse of international law? Because if there are two areas, among others, that will suffer that cost from different reasons, are Europe and Latin America.
I think that what Juan just mentioned is extremely, extremely important. And I would add here that the context of the change of our General Secretary of the UN could be an excellent opportunity for European countries and Latin American to work together on the decision regarding the new name to replace Guterres, which represented the European community, but also to think and work together on the reform that has to be done regarding global governance in all senses. I mean, we know, and it's been said again and again, that this architecture is not working. It's in decadence. It is, it's being humiliated. And this is something, as Juan mentioned, that was built together, or at least there was a strong collaboration between United States, between the Europeans and Latin Americans. Now, there's another front, which I think that could be thought of in the next 12 months and many more, which is a closer relationship with China to work together in Latin America. I mean, one thing that is not clear is how comfortable is the European Union today with the idea that Latin America will be transformed into a stable, and I'm putting here my commas, sphere of influence of the United States. Is the only issue that makes this an uncomfortable scenario for Europe is the possibility that Greenland will not belong to Denmark anymore? Is that the only issue? Because sometimes it seems like it. I mean, sometimes it seems that the whole question of strategic autonomy vis-a-vis the United States, the European strategic autonomy possibilities, are only measured regarding its closest geopolitical concerns, which is Russia and which is the territorial integrity of the European Union countries. Is that it? Is it so limited? Because the only power pole I see concerned with this possibility that we be transformed into a stable sphere of influence of the United States is China. China is concerned with that. China is working on a positive agenda with many, or many no, but some of the countries of the region. And but it could do at least in some points to do it together with European countries, European organizations. There could be much more triangular collaboration going on to break down this idea that the new order is an order of sphere of influence. This is something that definitely will not be helpful for the region, and I'm sure will not be helpful for the European Union and countries in general.
Let me just end by saying thank you so much. Thank you and your fantastic team that have made this second edition of the survey possible, and we look forward to sharing it with our network. Well, thank you so much for your time and your expertise today.
It was a pleasure.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye, Juan.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard today, check out all of our episodes available on SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. We have episodes in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Or follow us online. We would love to hear from you. We're on X, Blue Sky, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Head to www.eulas.network to find out more. Thank you. Gracias. Obrigada.